And there you go.
Awesome. Thank you, Vince. So yeah, thank you guys really for jumping on and participating. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Matt Schiavo. I am the local field engineer here in Los Angeles, working with the local office for Walters and Wolf, supporting projects and also supporting architects that are going for their permits. I can bring a lot of help and technical expertise to the office here in LA and any projects in San Diego County, LA County, or in Orange County. And I'll pass it on over to Christian Bayek to introduce himself.
Yeah, my name is Christian Beck. I am the senior business developer for some of the facade customers we have here within Hilti. So I'm trying to coordinate how we can be the best partner for our facade customers. That is a very short introduction. I've been with Hilti for 13 years and they're coming out of Europe, as you can hear from my accent. And I will leave it to Brian Barasini to introduce him.
Hello, everybody. I don't know why my screen just shows a blurred out image. My little light on the camera's on, but no go for me. I am the Bay Area rep for Hilti. I deal with your glass interiors and precast divisions offices here and have for a number of years. So I know a lot of the people on the production side and the process of your projects, especially on the embeds and the anchoring side. And I also deal with Firestop and a number of architects on a number of your projects. So I'm pretty well in tune with what you provide on the Firestop side. So we're looking forward to this. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and just share my screen here. It's going to give me the high sign here that my screen is up. That would be so awesome. All good. Can you see?
You're not in presentation mode, just for your information.
It says I'm screen sharing right now.
But you are, and you are.
Yeah.
All good?
We see the screen. It just it shows us in like your view. It was just fine. Like we could see the main screen and then we see like the next slide over in the corner.
Okay, maybe I can do. Okay.
PowerPoint always gets a little funny with Zoom.
Right.
It's helping you and it's not.
Okay. Let's just roll with it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the design assist services that we're offering Walters and Wolf, just to kind of get a better understanding of how your workflow works and how we can participate in the workflow from end to end. So really on our end, this project that you're seeing here is Mission Rock Building B. And the reason why this slide is up here is because that's a particular Walters and Wolf project with precast that sort of ties into what we're going to talk about today. So what we want to do is better understand the Walters and Wolf workflow, like how this is working today, what steps you feel like are happening in this workflow, maybe where we can help each other. And then also to better understand this 2307 fire testing, like what is slab edge fire stopping? What is the perimeter fire barrier? And how does it impact your business? We also want to talk about certain high level enforcers that have complex approval processes, specific markets. You guys work everywhere. So we want to kind of boil down which one of those markets or which one of those enforcement agencies would impact the approval process. And we'll kind of dive into that. We'll also kind of talk about how Hilti can be involved from my side with Brian and with Christian on this team to help you during the stages of pre-construction, just to simplify the process. So right now, what we see is there's definitely a collaborative workflow happening between architect, general contractor, and glazer. And that workflow entails that in the early stages of the job, the architect pretty much defines which scopes of work they're going to handle and which scopes of work are going to be deferred permit. And at that time, when you have the general contractor coordinating all those efforts, we're still usually in early construction documents or exiting DD. And so that's when Walters and Wolf would be brought on board. This is just, again, this is just my my workflow from previous projects. So interrupt me if I'm going off the tracks here, but the trade partners at that time usually provide all of their input. They're providing the input in design assist format to give the general contractor and the architect and the owner a better idea of what's constructible, what is feasible in terms of fabrication, and are we on budget. And we work together in this sort of trifecta between GC, architect, and glazer to get the workflow going. And then at some point in time, the architect is going to delegate to the glazer the perimeter slab edge design. And like Vince said, this is not ours, but it's definitely something that's integrated into our system. And so how do we better understand how to work within it and how to achieve our permit alongside that process? At that point in time, the GC will be sort of asked to tap the glazer and say, hey, when can we get a listing, or can we get an engineering judgment to incorporate that Firestop solution into the drawings? Now, I work with Brian, and Brian and I talk in the Bay Area. A lot of times the architect will put that EJ on their drawings, but down here in my market in Orange County and San Diego and in Los Angeles County, usually see the glazing shop drawings reflecting the engineering judgment. So just whoever's carrying the permit is the one that's responsible for those design elements. And why is it important? Well, it's important because, as you've seen in many of these news, you'll see these newsreels that come out, big stories on the news about fires, large scale catastrophe fires that happen. And one of them would be, say, Greenfell Tower. This is probably one of the bigger ones that happened in the past 30 years. It had polyiso insulation in the slab edge panels, and it was sort of like an NFPA 285 situation where you had flame within the panel itself, propagating like a sandwich panel situation. Definitely something that stresses the importance of selecting a proper Firestop system or a Firestop design that is code compliant. Here's another one here for the Dubai Luxury Hotel from 2015. This is another large scale sort of leapfrog effect where you can see the flames basically leaping outside the building and taking out the glass panels one at a time. And that has a lot to do with fire science and fire dynamics. When the flame is looking for oxygen, after it's completely consumed everything in the interior, it basically reaches out into the exterior and starts to go to the next floor. And so really, why does that relate to codes and standards or codes and approvals? What you're going to see is that in the code, really the requirement is to seal the floor line where the face of the slab meets the face of the interior of the system. And we'll actually show you that code section in more depth. But in this little image on the left here, you can see the void is open. And then after the animation, you can see that it's sealed between face of floor and face of system. The building code actually breaks this down in section 715. So not to nerd out on too much code stuff, but basically the code says that you have to fill that void with an approved system to prevent the interior passage of flame. A lot of architects tell me like, hey, what about the exterior? Well, you saw in that previous video or that previous image that the flame is already exiting. It's already taking out the panels on the exterior anyway. And in that test, that ASTM 2307 test, that is the specific test standard for curtain wall systems. Just kind of flash some images here. This is kind of what they're simulating in that test, where the flame is exiting and the flame is also basically punishing the interior joint. And when they set the Firestop or the fire burners on either side of the assembly, it's simulating that leapfrog effect. You can see in the center image there, that flame that flame plume is right on the spandrel area. In a UL test, you would have the mullion centered, or in an Intertech test, you have the mullion centered. You can barely see it there. And in a UL test, you have the spandrel fully engulfed in the flame. So they're both the same standard. They just test slightly differently in terms of the mullion placement, something to note. But yes, the IBC requires that a Firestop system be applied at the gap of the curtain wall. And so what you get is, after you do a full-scale test, a full-scale 2307 test, is usually the manufacturer will achieve a listing. And that listing is now part of the UL directory or the Intertech directory. It's basically a turnkey design detail that would otherwise not require an engineering judgment. And so why is this important to facade design or curtain wall design? It's because wherever you guys work, Walters and Wolf has offices in what we would consider enforceable markets. These are markets where not only do the code enforcement agencies enforce the code to the strict letter of the law, but they also have their own processes in place that actually kind of impact the workflow. So for example, you have regulatory bodies up and down California. You know, in Brian's area and in my area, we have a lot of projects that fall within OSHPD's jurisdiction or HCI's jurisdiction. If you're working with the California State Fire Marshal, you also might have the DGS or a division of the state architect if it's a DSA project. And California State Fire Marshal, in some areas, they may not accept certain engineering judgments or engineering judgments at all. And so that really stresses the importance of finding a listed system or a turnkey system that doesn't otherwise require an engineering judgment. So along with the code, which is that first step we talked about, then you have these enforcers that regulate the code. And then you have the regulatory bodies like plan checkers that require certain forms to actually go through plan check. So they actually want to see the code and then they want to enforce the code. But when it comes to the forms that they require, that usually is a for fee, right? The plan checker or the city wants a fee for usually the glazer to file that and say, hey, this is our deferred permit. And then here is the engineering judgments that go with that when you go into plan check. So here on the left, it's just a list of city jurisdictions that are between, say, San Francisco, LA, California State Fire Marshal. And on the right of this slide, it shows sort of the forms that are required. One of them I wanted to point out, going back to Mission Rock Building B, which is a precast project, is the AB05 form. This is a form that I worked on with Greg Athern on that project, alongside Hathaway Dinwiddie and Adamson Associates Architects. And really, we were able to manage that through plan check for Walters and Wolf. That was both for the glazing systems and for the precast systems. So that kind of service actually helped clear the permit for fabrication and design to continue and for the approval to be satisfied with the jurisdiction. And I believe San Francisco Fire is actually approving that as we speak for that project. So this is just a good example of what to look for in other markets, like say, for example, Washington, in Nevada, Clark County, and Arizona, Utah. These markets also require a form process when it comes to validating the shop drawings or validating the engineering judgments if there's a modification, because every time you have a listing, it's ready to go. And anytime you have a modification comes this process. So you can see here on the right side, again, just kind of coalescing with the bullet points on the left, some that stand out, say, for example, Nevada, Clark County, they require an 1003 form, alternate means and materials form. Or in Bellevue, Washington, they require an AMM form. If you're working in Denver, they go with an AMMR form. And so this is really where we can come in to help you and to help assist Walters and Wolf in any market that you're working in. It gives us that agility to help you with the different offices that have different expertise. And we want to offer our expertise to help you through plan check with those individual offices that are shooting for plan check deadlines. So this is kind of a summary of the services that we offer Walters and Wolf. And these services are offered to help you get through that plan check process. And it could be only one service, or it could be a grouping of services. It really doesn't matter. Brian, Christian, and myself are dedicated to this service offering in whatever capacity on whichever project. So to start, we can help you with finding systems. Brian and I have put together submittals like this. This is just a consolidated one, but think of like helping the Walters and Wolf engineers or designers quickly select systems so you can easily incorporate them into the drawings. You can see here, this is just kind of a schedule detail approach where you could keep this on your desktop, you could keep this on the Walters and Wolf server, and whenever you're dealing with perimeter fire containment, you could easily locate a system that matches, the MAC clip or that matches your design, and click on that and just drop it right into the drawings. This would be like more of the tested system approach. We also provide technical submittals, like just the overall submittal. Maybe you have a project that's LEED Maybe you have, it needs some CDPHs, or green building type requirements that the architect needs to satisfy because the joint has Firestop materials in it. We can provide technical submittals. Of course, we do engineering judgments. Brian and I do those on a daily basis. You would call us, send us your CAD drawing, and we would basically churn out a detail for you in CAD and send it back to you ready to go. And then, of course, if you need additional service on top of those sort of standard offerings, we offer wet stamp. So maybe you have a job where the jurisdiction wants to validate that the design is sound and they want a third-party approval. We can do that with a wet stamp. We use multiple engineering groups here in California and in other markets to provide wet stamps, in addition to our sign and seal on the EJ itself. You may have a project where the plan checker says, I want to be able to look at each individual component of the system, and I want it to read like a narrative. This is the way OSHPD is doing it, HCI, so California Hospitals, this applies. And those narratives are just a breakdown, kind of like reading a recipe. Each individual ingredient is basically laid out from step 1 to step 10, and you could just read it exactly like a listing would read. It references right back to the tested systems, and that makes the plan check process go quite easy because they can look at those tested systems as reference. We also offer full-scale 2307 testing evaluation. So maybe you have a California State Fire Marshal project where they want to fully burn test the exterior system. We can provide guidance because we have partnerships with Sidewalk Labs, UL, FM, Intertech. Depending on which independent body is going to test it, we can help guide you to those experts in full-scale testing and provide a budget, pricing, and then sort of the nuances of the testing of what to look out for so you have the best chance of passing a test. And then the last three are really dedicated to plan check services. I worked on this process with Steve Cisneros in the office down here in LA. And he had a project, 1601 Vine. It was a couple of years ago we did this project, and the city wanted the plan checker. The plan checker was questioning items related to fire, and I went to the counter with him. I sat with the project manager and we cleared the plan check milestone for him. So we offer that white glove service to go to these markets where you're going to have San Francisco fire chiming in, or LA City fire, or Anaheim fire, and I am the person that goes and does that, alongside the form that's being filed for plan check. So a really cool thing is if you have a plan checker questioning, you can just call the fire protection engineering team from Hilti direct, and they'll help get you out of hawk with the plan checkers. They'll basically state, hey, this is my EJ. These are the justifications behind it. And this is how it validates the performance for perimeter fire containment. So all of these are offered to you today. Some of these services are uncharged. Most of them are not charged. We do this as a service to help guide and provide expertise and consultation. The only ones that are for fee are the full scale testing, where you'd have to fully burn test, and sometimes wet stamping, depend on complexity. Most of the time we offer those as a service to you guys at no charge. So what are we offering? We're basically offering those services you saw to help guide you guys through the process, to let us do what we do best so you guys can manage the facade business. And there's a clear advantage to Walters and Wolf here, because if you're able to obtain your approval ahead of time and you don't have to worry about items related to fire containment, you're able to start fabricating much quicker. That's the implication, right? Is that if your deferred permit is held up by an item related to Firestop, we'll help remove that barrier to get your design turnkey and pass through plan check with the white glove service. And we're doing this with success. Like I said, the Mission Rock Building B project with precast and with glazing, this would be considered, I think, a successful workflow where this actually worked out, in harmony. So it gives you the peace of mind. It gives the GC the peace of mind as well that we're doing right by the client, right? We're getting that approval out of the way early, so we don't have to worry about the plan checker taking an exception or making comments. And meanwhile, you guys are waiting to fabricate because there's an item that's been commented on in plan check. So we're here to remove that barrier. We're here to remove that hurdle. And we're basically here to streamline the process for you, right? I was thinking this could kind of sort of be a workflow that we could work together on, that, maybe we start with identifying which ones are the complex projects coming out of bid, that maybe you would send those projects to us and we could kind of look and properly scope the job and say, this one's going to end up in Clark County. We foresee that these are the different stages that it's going to progress through plan check. We would, this is the solution that would work here. And then we'll file the form for you. We'll file all the necessary documentation to get it through with the approvals. We would help capture those projects in pre-con, have some dialogue about, hey, Hilti, do you have a solution for this? And we would basically deliver that back to you. We can provide our insight, because every market, every office has different expertise because they're dealing with the jurisdictions that they know best. So we have people where you have people. So if we can help streamline in this like Kaizen approach, doing more with less, helping streamline the workflow, we think that our business is a really good fit to provide those details and engineering judgments during plan check. All right, so that's pretty much the presentation in terms of what we're offering. I'll leave it kind of open to any questions or comments. We can go back to any slides if anybody has any questions.
Matt, do you think you could go over just a pretty typical detail for curtain wall? Just all the components that go into that.
Sure. Yeah, like a typical spandrel system, or
yeah. Let's just go a typical curtain wall that's got that's running but past the floors and has spandrel at the floor lines.
Sure. Yeah, let me pull one up here. I might even have one on deck that's just kind of a quick breakdown of. Here we go. All right, let me share off of this one. This one's a little different here. And I'll share off of the screen here. Here we go. So can you see this one here?
Yes.
Okay. This one is JS 120.05. And, if you look at components in the system, you can kind of see, this is just sort of a breakdown of a kind of a common system, but you would have sort of a clip system, to impale the curtain wall insulation within the unit. Clip systems are pretty popular because you're able to just clip off to the framing members that are already there. You would space those clips intermittently. And then you have item 2 here, which is the insulation board. This is like your rock wool, your curtain rock 80, that is basically just impaled right into the unit. So whether you field install it or whether you shop apply it, it just really depends, right? Insulation drops into the unit within the spandrel, behind the unit at the plane of the floor line, item 1, depending on joint width and depending on system, like where these mullions fall in relation to their span, you can see that fire test we talked about here, it really punishes the spandrel. So sometimes you need a stiffener angle right at the plane of the floor line. It just depends, again, on the system. Some systems are rigid enough to withstand 2-hour fire exposure, so they don't need an angle there. So after you've got the curtain wall insulation fully impaled in the unit, you use like a cinch shield or fasteners to apply it. Occasionally systems will require mullion covers that are on the face of the mullions. That can happen either above or below the floor line, or sometimes they're continuous. Most systems stop at the floor line and sort of bookend the mullion right here at number 4. And then, of course, the part that we have interaction with is the mineral wool or the fire resistive material. Sometimes this is prefabricated Firestop, and sometimes it's a spray applied material like Firestop mastic spray that joins the top of the slab or the face of the slab to the face of the curtain wall insulation and provides that proper seal. So again, you'll see listings that look like this, and then each component is sort of called out. And then if there's any deviation, like, say you start with a listing like this, but then your sill height goes much smaller, or you have something more unique, that's when you would apply an engineering judgment. So does that kind of make sense?
No, that's great. I think that's good to go over for everyone to see. So the number 4 there, the protection of the mullions, the mullion covers, like you just said, I mean, that's really dependent upon the whole system here. And we've been seeing that. I mean, it seemed like those have become more commonplace, or at least more commonplace, that what the architect has drawn as far as they've taken design, that they're calling for those mullion covers. Is there a condition that really drives having that more or not? Or is it really just, I don't know, I guess just up to whoever designed that system where they wanted to put it?
Well, you'll see that like with code development, I'm going to show you like some different systems that actually don't have, they're a little sleeker, right? So, as code continues to get to be developed, you can see like certain systems are offering like, say, full vision glass. Like this one is a lot less components, right? We went from like 25 components on that previous system to now this one might have just 8. So the answer,
I don't know if you switched I'm seeing the same detail as the last one.
Oh, really? Okay, let me see if I can switch over here. There should be this detail 120/27. As code starts to, as code develops, you can see like that, like you said, architect might draw something that's just full vision glass or doesn't have any mullion covers, right? So you can see like on specific systems like these, item 3B is essentially taking the place of a mullion cover at the vertical. So some systems over time, as code develops, they just get better. Systems get better. So, maybe it's a system that's very robust, that has a huge, say it's a huge panel. That system might have the bracket directly exposed, but again, it doesn't deal with bracket protection per se. It has to do with just the mullion protection. That you won't have a breach in that fire test with flames coming right through the gap at that vertical mullion connection. So whatever is the best case of passing is really how it shows up in the listing. But here, for example, you could have full vision, basically have your system with just a 3x6 curtain wall insulation box. And then you would have this quick seal material, which is actually not spray applied. It's a prefab material that just drops into the gap, right, with an adhesive on either end, and would basically join the top of slab to face of system. And then 3B, you would run 3B along for a section of that vertical mullion, which is shown right here. They call it actually a cover, or 3B is a vertical mullion framing an additional 12-inch strip facing down on the underside. So that would be that little run of quick seal, if you will, that is underneath the vertical mullion there, or running alongside underneath. So systems like this, again, are optimized. Maybe an architect has an idea and then you have your system, you send it to us for sort of an evaluation, a review, and then maybe a system like this just works as is and it doesn't require an EJ. And so the path forward would be, oh, well, this one is actually a benefit, because if it's in a certain market that might question an engineering judgment, there's no question that this system would be ideal. And where we see the industry going, Vince, is that the more you guys standardize, the more we start to standardize. Like the more systems that become more typical, then we end up testing more of those typicals in hopes that we make a system that exactly matches what you guys are installing. And it ends up not really requiring an EJ, right? It's just a turnkey basis of design.
I think the challenge that we've run into a lot in the past comes down to our anchorage, and the fact that that really is an area where the industry, the curtain wall industry, isn't standardized, especially at the higher levels, where a lot of the established turnkey systems are built around more of like a knife plate coming off that the mullion's attaching to, which is very typical, like with a stick wall. But when you look at, Walters and Wolff has our mat clip, which you referenced earlier, which really we have, very different than what Benson has or Enclose has. And we run into that where the authority having jurisdictions like, this anchor is not exactly what's there. And so we're having to get those engineering judgments for the fact that that anchor condition, how we're anchoring the curtain wall, isn't exactly what was in the test.
Yeah, this happens a lot, not only with the anchor type, but also with top of slab or face of slab.
Right.
Some
Right.
systems are tested. We do have systems tested with both configuration, including the embed. So that was helpful for a project that we had. I think it was in Chico. California State Fire Marshal wanted to see the exact face mounted anchor with the exact type of clip, and we can share those with you. And I think we should probably, when we share our systems with you, we'll note those maybe like in a storyboard, or just even some notes right on the system of what it is. What am I looking at? Is it a low sill height face mount? Is it a top of slab anchor? You know, does it kind of jive with what we're looking for? That way, when your engineers and designers are selecting systems, it's easy to just go right to it and say, oh yeah, face of slab, top of slab, low sill height, 20-inch spandrel, 10-inch spandrel, 0 spandrel. You know, there's lots of different you know, ways to pivot there and give the authority having jurisdiction what they need to satisfy the plan checker. So we can
Great.
help with that for sure. Do you guys foresee pipeline wise, like we have multiple folks on the call from different offices? Does this workflow, going back to those jurisdictions, has it ever impacted your ability to get an approval? Has it ever bottlenecked? Do you ever see the GC struggling to get that, or is it the architect that's struggling, or is it the shop drawings that are lagging? Any of those markets stand out, you know, whether it's Clark County, San Diego, LA, any of them stand out?
I think that, I mean, a lot of what we see comes down to what the project is. So much of our work is private work. And this usually isn't a problem. I mean, it's able to flow through really quickly. In recent history, the projects where we've had some challenges have been more about, it's not a private project. I mean, the ones that have stood out, you know, company-wide have been for projects for the state of California, where DGS has been involved and the state fire marshal has been involved, where they have not wanted to accept EJs, and we've had to ultimately do the testing. I mean, then, you know, on natural resources and on O Street in Sacramento, I mean, those were both projects the first time in our history that we'd actually participated in one of the, and I can't remember the number now from earlier, but one of the fire tests, and, you know, went to Texas where we actually had to burn it. Now, luckily, no one on the design team was pointing fingers that that was our responsibility to have to do that. But I could see a lot of situations where we could be in trouble, where someone goes, no, you needed to supply this system. You need to make sure that you have everything it takes to get that approved. If it comes down to having to run a test, which is very expensive, I mean, can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, but when it's all said and done, to supply it and test it and whatnot, that would ultimately be ours. Luckily, in those cases, it wasn't. But that's the worry, especially I think when we're doing public works projects, and we can have, when we have state fire marshal, DGS involved.
Okay. And then what about like for other projects, like who's taking the design responsibility to call for the engineering judgment? Brian has mentioned that a lot of the workflow goes through him, where he'll get alerted by the project manager or the design team and say, hey, Brian, this job is happening in San Diego County, provide us an engineering judgment. Is there a percentage of, you know, reaching out or communication that is going out? Or is everybody doing it a little different in how they're requesting those judgments? Are they coming mainly from the manufacturer? Are they coming from the installation side? Is it coming from the specialty contractor? And how can we help unify that, you know, amongst all offices, or help have, you know, synergy with all offices?
I think today, I mean, once the job is turned over to operations from pre-construction, we're never doing this work ourselves. So we're hiring a sub to be able to do it. We're hiring a specialty contractor that's usually an insulation sub that specializes in the insulation and the fire safing, and will do that system. And they in turn are going and getting the engineering judgment. That's what I see happens most often. But again, like, it's that, since ultimately we're responsible because it's part of our system, we need to make sure that we're buying that out correctly, that we're figuring that correctly, and having, mitigating the risk as much as possible for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that based on the past, probably 7 years of interacting with glazers, that do, a variety of facade types and have their proprietary systems, and others that are doing complex projects that are private, and also ones that are within those jurisdictions I was talking about, is a lot of them are reaching out to the manufacturer direct, because there's a benefit in expediting the approval. It's just a little less back and forth in having the system get approved. And when we talk to our specialty contractors, there's definitely a kind of a blind spot there where they don't have a lot of resources and manpower to get through plan check. So if you give the EJ directly to the GC and the architect, that might be fine for most projects. So it might be, okay. But on those ones that are complex, yeah, feel free. I mean, reach out to us and utilize that as a service, because, like, for example, that one for Mission Rock B, that was one that we got alerted early. And then through that collaboration, Greg had sent us his shop drawings and said, hey, we need welded pins for this job on the welded pan. And then for precast, we need a solution like this. And this was actually months before the specialty contractor had any input on that. They were going for satisfying San Francisco fire marshal comments.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is a space for it. It's not a niche per se. I think it's like, well, if Hilti's going to offer all of these services up front, and most of them are like not charged services unless we're going for full scale testing, might as well leverage the manufacturer who has their expertise in the system that they tested and be able to sort of expedite that. And right now, engineering judgments are coming back in a very quick manner. 24 hours is pretty common for a VIP type customer like Walters and Wolf. But in the end, I think if you can lean on us more often, I think we're going to see a more expedited workflow, because the last thing we want is to have a job like a San Francisco fire project where fire marshals chiming in, there's already being units fabricated, and yet the fire containment system is not yet approved, right? It's a join to the system. So if we can just knock it out early, I think it helps reduce that potential risk.
Yeah, if
I
I
think
can.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Vince. Yeah, if I can interject here a little bit, I'm currently working with DES on a couple of projects that are Walters and Wolf projects. One of them being Moffett Tower, Building 6. And I don't know how much communication at this point between the architect and your firm there is, but they're working through some issues with hiding our systems. And so far, they've changed spandrel heights on at least one application based on what we can provide on their original design versus changing the spandrel height by a couple inches. Another is they have vision glass where they want to go directly to the glass, and they're struggling with the detail I showed you earlier. That's a sheet metal pan that goes there, so they don't want to color the pans. They're struggling with how to address the installation of the mineral wool in the Firestop against the glass or to the glass, because it's vision glass there at those lines. So if we were earlier and worked with you, we might be able to provide the architect with here's Walters and Wolf's system, here's the Firestop system. We've already adapted the right panel, so it'd be easier for you to have construction instead of going back and forth and having to negotiate that with them, and surprises to you, I'm afraid, when they come up and say, gee, we want this because of the Firestop issue. I think that might be a benefit to you guys as well if we have an early look at these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm just wondering on that project specifically, we've got Robert on the call who is managing that project. I mean, have those items that Brian just brought up, I mean, did DES bring those to us?
They actually just sent an email this morning about it. Yep.
Okay, there we go.
There you go.
Seeing if we could do a frit within the glass at the floor line to cover it up instead of on the back of the glass. But this is the first time they've reached out about it.
That's awesome. See, it's those early insights that we're talking about, is having that synergy between Robert and Brian, or Christian and myself, or me with Vince. I think it just proves that, we can offer those insights early, And sometimes, you know, the specialty contractor is just from a budgetary standpoint, right? They know the amount of insulation, they know kind of how the joint width's going to go, but the intricacies, the different nuances of your system, if we get sort of a first look at it, I think it's a huge benefit in getting ahead of that, because the architect sees the value. And sometimes it might just be off your plate altogether, as long as the architect is willing to specify, right? Because if they're willing to take it and put it on their general notes, then you can just cloud it as smoke seal by others. But for those ones that are like, you know, Moffett, where they're, you know, actually your drawings coming in, you know, overlaid, I think this is great where we can provide some of that expertise like Brian mentioned. So that was awesome. Thank you for mentioning that, Brian and Robert.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone else on the team?
All right.
All right. Matt, if you want to get me all of your team's contact info, we'll share that with the team and make sure that everyone's got it, because I think it would be good, like you said. I mean, when we're looking at a project, if there's anything that's atypical, just to be able to bounce it off you guys and be able to get some input would be good. Really
Awesome. Yeah. And yeah, if you could link us together with those experts, Vince, I mean, you're down here and you travel between both offices. If there's a point of contact for pre-construction that Christian can work on with me and with Brian, and there's other team members on my team that cover, you know, Vegas and Denver and Utah, then maybe we can partner up more proactively in those offices that are, you know, sort of outside my geography, and we can communicate.
No, that's what I'm saying. If you guys, if I get all your contact info, however you guys want it, best way to reach out, we'll share it with the team. I can send you guys as well a list. We've got a list of all of our team members by geographical area. But what's good here, or at least you just be aware of, and I think I mentioned this when we talked a couple months ago, we really look at a lot of our work globally now. So it's not that, hey, some, you know, an estimator in Northern California only estimates Northern California work. We're spread out. I mean, we've got Ian's on the call right now, who's just finishing up a bid for a job up in the Bay Area. I mean, we bounce. Aja's working on in SoCal, working on a job up in the Bay Area right now. So we are all over the place. So it's good. You know, we'll share it with you, and so we know who to talk to depending upon where that project's located.
Awesome. That's great. No, thank you again, Vince, for the opportunity. And Christian too, if you can get him in touch. Christian has some topics that are related to the embed, because that's also kind of tied into this, that he'll take up on at a later date. But yeah, thanks again for the opportunity, and we will see you guys very soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks,
Have a
guys.
good one.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.